Hey, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joe Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
You know, one of the things that I don't know if anybody really talks about this, but when you're in the middle of personal growth projects, personal growth steps in your life, you know, maybe you're in a process of really working through some big healing work from your past. You've got trauma you want to overcome. Maybe you're working on some achievement right now in your life where you're trying to get to the next level in your business or set some goals for yourself for the next few years and you're starting to work toward those. Or even transcendence work. You're looking to get more spiritual practices in your life. Or maybe you're looking to unhook from a faith background you came from and discover a new path in front of you going forward. And so you've got some of the work that you're doing to make that transition. Personal growth really is growth of transition. It's really about transitions. It's about moving from one thing to the next, about metamorphizing. Is that the right word? Metamorphizing? Am I saying that correctly?
Maybe.
I think you get the point though.
Yeah.
It's about basically moving from something into something else. And one of the things I don't know if we really talk about a lot is just how much energy it burns and it takes to be able to grow or learn or change. And depending on what you're doing, depending on the type of work you're doing, the type of personal growth, it can burn metric tons of energy versus not much energy at all, depending on what you're working down. So today we want to talk a little bit about energy management and how personal growth. One of the things that we've talked about, Antonia, in the last couple of weeks, we've been through lots of personal growth challenges together and separately, and we're going through one right now, right? It's kind of a personal one, but we're going through some personal growth stuff in our lives. And one of the things we've been talking about is, wow, it's so nice to have space to do personal growth work. And we were talking about how not everybody always seems to have that space. If you've got a super busy life, you're running every day, you're going to work, you're getting the kids out to the door for school, or you're going to college, you're trying to pass your classes, you're trying to achieve and move and just keep your life together, just get through maybe to the weekend or the next day, and the money's tight and the work just never seems to stop. And now you've got maybe parents in the mix, maybe they're getting older, depending on your life situation, or now you've got a new kid on the way, or whatever the changes in your life. Life doesn't seem to slow down. It seems to get more intense. It seems to get more pressured. It seems to run at a faster and faster and faster pace. Where in the world are we as people going to find the energy and the time to do the growth work that we want to do in our lives? And it can be a challenge. It can be really difficult to balance all of that and generate enough energy to be able to grow.
Yeah. I think it's easy to underestimate how much energy growth work takes. Like I mean, just in the spirit of radical honesty, I'm exhausted right now. We have to record a podcast because we have to, because that's what we do. We're podcasters. And I've been really struggling to record this podcast because I've been so tired, because like you mentioned, we're in the middle of a pretty intense development project. And the sad thing, or not the sad thing, but the challenging thing is that sometimes these growth projects, you can't schedule them out. Sometimes they just happen to you. Like you're ready. All of a sudden you're psychologically ready for whatever's coming next, and it hits you, and now you've got to work through it, and there are things to be done, but now you've got this emotional and psychological process in front of you, and you're trying to juggle all this stuff, and you've got responsibilities, and like you mentioned, sometimes it's just what do you do in those moments? And I think one of the easiest things to do is to remove off of the plate the thing that looks like the designer item, which growth oftentimes can feel like a designer item. I actually think we treat personal development work like it's a designer feature. It sometimes feels like a toy poodle in a bag on some celebutante's, waist. It doesn't always, it feels like a nice to have, because it comes along with, I've been doing this journal lately that our friend Betsy Garman put us on to. Is this, she's an artist and an INFJ and a lovely human being. And she's been talking about creating these artistic journals, which aren't just diary entries, but they're also, you put in keepsakes and you put in imagery and doodles and what she calls found poetry which are just lines in books and, magazines that really strike you, and you tape or glue or whatever all of these things into these journals. And so the journals aren't just pages and pages of writing, but they're also all this, sort of symbolism, things that meant something to you. So we've been doing these journals lately, and the work itself looks like craft project, right? I get to go, like, we went
scrapbooking.
Yeah, it looks like scrapbooking. Like I found these really cool different styles of tape, and I found all this really neat markers, and I've been looking at all these journals and collecting journal, imagery and all that stuff. And it looks like it's a fun craft project. This is intense personal development work for me, by the way. Cutting all these pictures out and pasting them into an old book, because you start out with an old book that you buy at a used bookstore that really speaks to you. It's a hardbound, and then you use the pages inside. You like cover over the words with imagery or like with paint, and then you write over it. It's a whole process, but it looks like a craft project. And then I'm looking at all these magazines and journals that I've picked up in order to get the kind of imagery that strikes me for this particular journal. And this journal is actually around femininity. And I'm a little late to the game, so I'm just now reading Women Who Run with the Wolves and watching a lot of YouTube videos on femininity. And I think I'm around that age. And as an ENTP, it's taken me a long time to sort of rest into this concept of what's my feminine archetype. It's a big deal for me. It's a big deal for me because I think I have a lot of wounding here, and I have a lot of challenge in this area. But the journals I'm picking up, which I instinctively started picking up things like, like yoga and, journals around meditation and mindfulness. And the journals are beautiful. They're glossy, and they show just one picture right after another of women, like attractive women and attractive men in various states of like serene pose. And they just look like they've never had a stress wrinkle in their life, and everything is just really great for them. And my assumption is that, they're like they live in Santa Monica, and they live in yoga pants and they eat the highest quality food every morning, and it all feels very designer. Everything about personal development work right now feels very designer. And because of this imagery that we get, I'm looking at my quote unquote craft project that's actually hardcore development work for me right now. And the magazines that make everything look like, everybody's at a certain socioeconomic level and all living in yoga pants. And it's really easy to go, I got bills to pay. I've got kids, like you said, I got to get to to school. You and I are right now at that time period of entering middle age where we keep calling it the squeeze, where we have like little kids on one side and like aging parents on the other side, and they're both are pretty dependent in some ways. And then we also at that level of like building a business where we get taxed like literally the most of any other business, right? Like the little tiny fledgling businesses don't get taxed as much as us, and like the humongous businesses of like, hundreds of millions of dollars don't get taxes. But like we're in that squeeze, right? We're right at that level where everybody's basically figuring out a way to take from us in some way.
We don't get the student or senior discount, right?
No student senior discount. We just call it the squeeze, right? We're at that time period of the squeeze, and it's easy to feel that squeeze on every level. And then I'm looking at these things that I'm doing as my personal development projects, and it's so easy to go, okay, this can wait until tomorrow. And then just, this can wait till tomorrow. And just keep saying that over and over. I've got a podcast to record. I've got emails to write. I've got a program to put together. I've got clients to talk to. I've got so many things. I've got a kid to watch. I've got a kid to homeschool. I've got, your boys are coming this weekend. We've got clients coming next week. Like, there's so much going on that these things feel like they're easy to put to the back burner, but I chose not to this week. I chose to put them to the front burner. I was like, no, this is the time period where I really need to address some of these major, major personal development challenges. And so what ended up happening is it wasn't so much that it was time consuming. It was that it was a major resource hog. I'm just tired. Like, I'm just legit tired right now. And I'm tired because we've been doing so much work, internal, emotional, and psychological work. Like, I can feel this week, I could feel my brain rewire itself around some very long-standing beliefs about how the reality works. about what would be deal breakers for me in life and what wouldn't be, around like all this stuff that I just like was majorly central to my identity. I just had a bunch of epiphanies and it rewired. And just the rewiring itself made me really tired afterwards. Like having my brain create new superhighways. Afterwards, I'm like, man, I'm tired. I think I need to go to bed. And the emotional work that gets in there too, letting go of parts of your ego, and the work that we're doing, Joel, you and I are doing it together, but also separate for the first time. We keep talking about how we are, what the work we do together, we call it, I think I've mentioned this in a previous podcast, we call it soul spelunking. And I've envisioned each of us being like these huge caves that we get the benefit of exploring that inner terrain, those caves together most of the time. But a couple years ago, we ran up against, I would call it cave wall inside of you that had been, is it okay if I talk about all this?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. I'm just talking. Let me know if I hit any area that's...
Oh, I will.
Yeah,
it's
too transparent.
No, it's all good. Keep going.
Okay. I just had a sip of my coffee because it's delicious. All right. So we...
Because you're the most dehydrated person on the planet.
I am. Somebody recently said I was the most dehydrated person on the planet. Anyway, so there was this wall in front of what I assumed was a cavern of parts of who you are internally. And I very much, because I'm a gamer, I always envision this in like I'm playing Diablo 3 or something where I'm like entering a cave. And you and I, as our our 2-person party, ran up against this cave inside of you, and it looked like there was a wall. When we started addressing this wall, it was not just a wall. It was brick and steel, and like there was many layers to it.
Rebar.
There was so much to this wall that had blocked off a humongous portion of, I believe, your identity. And we spent years and years and years and years working on just trying to break this wall down. And when we finally did, and you're like, I'm ready to do this major work. And I'm like, yes, we're going to do this major work together. Because what happened is that, again, I'm a gamer, so I think of things in terms of video games. If you've ever played the video game Portal, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, you should. I don't care if you're a gamer or not. You should immediately go out and buy that game because it's like one of the greatest video games of all time. It's a Portal series or series of 2 games, and they probably won't make a third. But that grievance aside, there's this concept in Portal where you create 2 separate gates and you walk through one of the portals and then you end up coming out the other one, regardless of how many different, like you could be on the other side of the universe, and if you open one portal and walk through it and somebody opens the gate on the other side, then you get access to immediately, whomming back and forth between 2 places. And I see us as being caverns where we both have portal guns. And so sometimes we're in your caves and spelunking in your inner terrain, and then we'll shoot the portal gun and then we'll whom over to mine. And we do this work together. But when we put that wall down, what happened is that when we discovered that wall, we portaled over to my inner terrain and went, okay, well, we'll work on my stuff for a while. And then I realized that there was a whole piece of me that had a film over it. I know this is super abstract. What the hell am I talking about? Anyway, there was this film over it. Like I couldn't access these parts of who I was until we addressed these parts of who you were. And I went, oh shit. Okay, so let's whom back to you and let's start breaking this wall down. So we broke the wall down, metaphorically, of course. Years and years and years of personal development work, just being willing to address this part of who you were. We finally broke the wall down, and there was like this little sign behind the wall that said, only player 1 has access.
Yeah. And for some context, there's some deep healing work here from my past, from my maybe past relationship, from my childhood. Like it's a lot of like deep personal work. Just to give you some context of what wall down. Just almost like anytime you're doing healing work, you've got to kind of chip away at some of the old belief patterns, old habits, old ways of thinking. And so that's actually the work that we were doing is I was working on this, and I would often, because Antonia is my best friend, she's my lover, she's my partner in business and in life, I would talk this through. So just to kind of give you more of a concrete aspect of what that looks like, it's definitely work that I'm doing to heal on my side. And I think you've been doing healing work too on your side, right? And whatever. But this is just the particular areas of my life that are very specific and personal to me that I've been working on, and then Antonia's been along in that journey. So that's more concrete of what of what you're talking about, I guess, just to give some sense.
Super abstract, metaphorical. My apologies if it makes total sense to me. Again, we've been doing a lot of work this week, so I'm quite tired, and I'll just have to make that caveat multiple times throughout this podcast, is that I'm actually quite exhausted. So I'm trying to make sense, and I'll do my best to make sense. But so in the practical, really what that means, like you said, is that a wall in any part of your inner terrain is all of your resistances to going there. Because there are parts of who we are that are maybe even huge components of our identity, but they're attached to a bunch of stuff that could be potentially quite painful or just really scary. So we build these walls to prevent us from being able to enter them at all. And the walls are resistances to even going there. So when you like suggest a person works on a certain aspect of who they are, or suggest that they go figure out like who they are in this element, you can tell that the person is a wall because their language is gatekeeper language. Their language starts being like, no, I don't need to do that, or that's stupid, or like, I think that that's morally wrong is one of the best walls, is like somehow it's morally wrong to go to that part of who you are. And of course it all gets abstracted, right? Well, people who are into power are bad people. Well, it's like, why don't you go explore your own power? No, because power is wrong, right? So you get these walls that people put up, and it's hard to penetrate them, so you have to break down the resistance to begin with, right? And so we spent a long time breaking down that resistance. But then once we broke down the resistance and you were like, let's do this thing, then we got that sign that said, in the cave entrance, it was like, player one entry only, which effectively meant I couldn't go with you. So this personal development work that you're doing totally solo without me for the first time in years, basically since the beginning of our relationship. You are doing an entire personal development project pretty much most on your own. And what happened when I used my portal gun, my metaphorical portal gun, to wand back to my identity, my cave that I'm spelunking, the film to that part of the cave for me started to sort of remove itself. And so I have this whole thing that I'm realizing that I'm going to have to go do on my own too. So for the first time, you and I are doing personal development projects completely on our own, because we recognize that the relationship we've built together will actually disrupt the process, because we'll be looking to each other too much to reinforce whatever it is that we want reinforced. It's actually the relationship itself is a disruptor to the work. And that's scary because we've always grown together. And I, of course, all these fears come up whenever you're doing work. It's always going to end in disaster, right? Like all work is going to be the worst. And my big fear was, well, when we get to the end of this work, who will we be? And will we still want to come back together? Will we still want to have a confluence with each other? Or will we grow so radically differently in our identities that we won't, like, our relationship won't last? And it's like, oh my gosh, the emotion of all that has just been really tough. But the point of that is we chose to do this work this week. And we spent a lot of time talking to each other and a lot of time, like, kind of sort of keeping each other up on what's going on for us. And I don't think I've ever been so tired. I mean, I've been in some pretty tiring situations, but this
You mean emotionally tired? You don't mean like physically tired, do you?
Well, but it ends up being physically tired. Like, I'm so emotionally exhausted and so psychologically. And like I said, I could feel my brain rewiring. And after one moment of that, I was like, man, I got to go take a nap because it's just so tiring. And I made the choice to do that, but then that meant that everything got, like, all the cans got kicked down the road because I couldn't do them simultaneously. And I was really grateful that just how this week panned out, because most of the time I wouldn't be able to do that. I'd have to do everything concurrently. The way this week turned out is that this was one of the few weeks that could really happen. And I'm grateful to that gift. I'm grateful to the gift that this was one of the few weeks in our year, right, in our calendar, that I could really just kind of focus on development and growth and allow myself to sort of rest a little bit after doing all this work. But when a person has a life that is filled with so many different things, when they're in the middle of the squeeze, is it the right decision to go ahead and take the personal development leap, knowing that you're not going to be able to show up for the rest of your life for a small amount of time? Like, is that the acceptable
in
decision
the rest
to make?
of your life?
In the rest, right?
Not for the rest of your life. Not for the entire duration of the rest of your life. Just want to be clear about that.
No, you're going to be very important for me in this podcast because, again, I'm exhausted. So thank you for making sure my words are clear. Yeah, so like you just can't show up in the rest of your life for a small amount of time. And is that okay? Was that okay decision to make? And I think because, again, development and work looks so designer, it looks like the thing that should be put to the back, to the back, the bottom of the list. Everything else should be handled first. And I made the choice to go the opposite direction this week. And because of that, I've had some game-changing insights.
By the way, I want to hear some of these game-changing insights if you're willing to share at some point. I don't know if that's something that's too personal for this podcast. But I do want to make a quick comment, a couple distinctions here around, I don't believe all personal growth work is going to pull you out of your life at all times. Like if you're looking to work on a skill, for example, maybe, develop some kind of a way of being or a new talent or skill, it might pull some resource and some energy. What you're talking about, Antonia, is identity level challenges. So stuff that we're basically talking about the personal growth work where you challenge your current view of your reality. You have a certain reality or a certain way of seeing yourself and the world around you, and you're going into the programming of your life and you're going, do I actually believe this? Do I actually see it this way? Do I actually want to continue going forward with this identity? So you're talking about identity level growth, which burns way, 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 way more energy than like learning a new, maybe like if you're learning nonviolent communication, for example, that's going to take some resource, but it's a skill you're developing that you can actually practice in the rest of your life, work with your family, whatever. That's just an example. But if you're working on identity level change, you're basically challenging the current view of your reality, that is going to pull tons of resource because our identities and our egos just like latch on and things become easy and we know who we are, and you're asking yourself to start changing some of that. And that can be threatening. It can just burn resource. It's treacherous ground because we don't know where we're going with it. It's brand new maybe sometimes. And so this can often be what the energy drain is. So it really depends on the kind of work. I just wanted to make that distinction, that don't think, if you're a new listener, for example, if you're like, holy crap, the personal growth work is always going to pull me out of my life. I don't think that's always the case.
I think it's really good that you mentioned that distinction because as you were talking, what came up for me is that's probably why most people's personal development focuses on skill building. Because skill building it takes resource to do it, but there's like a clear ROI and it's very non-threatening and you can apply it almost immediately. The kind of growth that I'm talking about has murky ROI. It could actually change your life in ways that are unpredictable. It isn't frequently immediately applicable. Like you kind of have to understand what this means for the rest of you. And it's a total resource hog. So identity level growth and development is by far away the hardest to do. And it has the most question marks around it, which I think is why most people's growth and development maintains, like it stays at a skill level development. Yeah,
because you're challenging who you are, not what you do. Like skill is just about, okay, I'm learning new things to do. But this is who I am is going to change. And that's disruptive. And in some ways, in order to change who you are, there's a destructive element to it. You're kind of destroying the old parts of you, or at least metamorphizing. I'm using this word again. I don't know why I keep using this word. Transitioning them. You're moving them from a transitional way from what they've been to something they are now. And that is, you're letting go of parts of you in a sense. And that can be terrifying. And just the fear alone can be exhausting. And I think the challenging who you are is so difficult.
Well, and I think one of the reasons why it's hard for people to even begin the process is because it's kind of like the caterpillar that turns into a butterfly. Once it goes into the cocoon and starts the liquefying process, it can't really stop. If it stops the process while it's liquefying, it just dies. Like it's not going to be a caterpillar or a butterfly. It'll be nothing. It'll be dead. So once you start on this process of doing core identity level work, once you say yes, you kind of have to keep going because otherwise you die on the vine, right? Like you can't go back. You can't go back to where you were before. And that's why the phrase, the way out is through, is so important because once you start that process, you have to keep going. Otherwise, if you truncate it too early because it's too painful or too much or overwhelming or You're not sure where the direction of this. You can't control it. Who knows who you'll be at the end of all of this? Like once you start that process, you got to keep going. Otherwise, you can kind of tell when people have truncated their personal development process, and it's almost like they just kind of float, right? Like there's no shore for them to go back to, and there's no island for them to, as a destination. And so I think the other reason why it feels designer and gets put to the bottom of the list is because it's a major commitment. Once you start the process, you can't really go back. And I think the reason why it's important to recognize how expensive real work is because I think when people have an expectation that personal development growth is not going to be as difficult as it actually is. We kind of talked about this a little bit in our podcast about pseudo growth versus real authentic growth. Only you know whether or not you're doing real growth. And if you're doing true authentic growth, it's expensive. It's like energetically expensive. And when people start going down this road and they haven't really kept that in mind or counted the cost of that, I think that's when they pivot to pseudo growth. Because if they can just get the markers down, if they just have the language, if they just have like the outer world expression of it, if they can sort of fake it, then that's the easier road than to keep going down this really painful liquefying process. But then you never really become the butterfly. You might have all the right markers of it, but you're basically still just kind of hanging there. And knowing how emotionally and psychologically expensive it is, I think is one of the most important things a person can do before they start a true identity level shift growth process. But I think it's also important to remember why we do it in the first place. You were about to say something. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
Well, when you come down to that, into that thought, I have some notes I wrote, just some things to think about when you're going to this kind of work, a quick bullet list of some practical ideas that we can talk about as you're doing growth work, of ways to go about it that I think will be really helpful in a practical way. Because I know we're talking really abstractly right now. We're talking in terms of like, caves and walls and identity level, challenge your reality, energy. Like it sounds so ethereal. So I wanted to go through some practical elements of this, and we can talk about them as we go through this quick list. And you might have some things to add to this list too. But I wanted you to complete your thought before we go down that road, because I'm going to shift gears when that happens.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, and thank you for doing that. Yeah, no, I just wanted to, because it sounds really intense and doomy and gloomy. And my apologies that I've been so abstract in this podcast.
I think it's good. I think people I think you listening probably appreciate some abstract elements, right? Like I don't think you're a turnoff to say all that. I think it's good. I think we need the abstract, and then we also need to make sure we can apply it as well.
Absolutely. So I'm appreciative. How is your brain working so much better than mine is right now? It's like,
I have no idea.
Because I know you've been going through the same thing that I've been going through, but maybe your stamina, your personal development stamina, you've built it to a point where you can withstand all this. And me, I'm still tired. I'm like, oh my God, it's so exhausting. So, I was just going to make a mention before we get to that more practical piece that it's easy to underestimate just how much energy this work takes. And when you start going down this road, the ROI on it, the return on investment, the rewards at the end can get really murky what those are, because sometimes the identity level shifts require choices that are quite painful. Like you realize, and I think this is pretty much one of the major components to development work, is it's basically like aligning your soul. It's soul alignment. It's making sure you're fully in integrity, both internally and externally. And when you do identity level shifts, you realize that because you're not actually changing who you are finding who you were to begin with and removing all of the elements that you adopted in order to get along in the world. You're actually shedding strategies more than you're finding a new you. You're finding the original you. And when you've made all these decisions, strategies to get through life, and then you come and find the original you never wanted any of that stuff, And then you have to start making all these choices that might like end relationships or be massive career changes or moving to a completely new place. And then you've got other expenses, right? It's expensive, not just emotionally and psychologically, but it can actually be like financially expensive, and it's time expensive. Once you get to that place, it can be really easy to forget why you're doing it in the first place. And I remember my friend saying one time when I took up running. Again, I take up running every once in a while. It's just a thing that I do, and I hate it, and I never get runner's highs. It's like I think I've gotten a runner's high twice in my over a decade of being a runner.
Is that because you were really high? I'm just kidding.
I don't know. I'm starting to think about doing cardio while high, like actually legitimately high, because I might actually get a high then, but I never got a runner's high. It just, I don't know. I'm kind of like Gimli. Do you remember on Lord of the Rings where Gimli the dwarf was like complaining about having to do all that running, and he's like, dwarves are natural sprinters, very dangerous over short distances. And I'm like, that's me. I'm the dwarf. I'm a natural sprinter. So like running for 2 miles, and that's like not a lot to actual runners, but to me it was always like if I could get to 2 miles, and this is after like a decade of running, I was like, oh my God, I made it to 2 miles. That's amazing. So yeah, I'm like Gimli. I'm very dangerous over short distances, but not very effective over long distances. And anyway, the point of all that is I every time I take up running, I complain about it, right? I'm like, this is the worst thing ever. And a friend of mine, Cameron, one time said, well, yeah, of course it's hard. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And I don't know why, but I mean, it was just one of those like really insightful INTJ pithy comments that like made me go, oh yeah, I guess that's probably true, right? And that's the same thing with development and growth. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it, but it's not. And like with doing running or any form of cardio, or anytime you start a new diet or like a lifestyle change of relationship with food and exercise, it takes a long time for you to see the returns. And it's the startup cost is so expensive, and it can be really easy to forget why you're doing it to begin with. Because, like, oh, I gotta get to bed early so I can wake up and, go do my exercise or whatever. And, or I could just keep watching Bill Maher and eating Pringles. Like in that moment, option B looks way better than option A. So personal development is very similar to any sort of physical work. And actually, I actually think that exercising and nutrition are actually personal development. I think that it's all personal development. And the psychological component mirrors the physical component. It takes the startup cost is terrible, and it's very expensive in all ways. In all resources, it's expensive, and you can forget why you're doing it to begin with. And if you stop in the middle, you're hosed. So it's one of those things that really being honest about why you're starting it is super important, and then remembering that the gains are found over time. And just like I think. I don't know if this happens all the time with people who are starting like new exercise regimes, but it's kind of like one of those things. I remember losing weight one time doing an exercise regime, and it was kind of like a surprise when I put on my jeans, and I was like, wow, I have like a lot of space here. Like the waist is like way bigger than I remember it being. And it was kind of like a moment of like, wow, okay, so I guess this is working. But it took a long time to get there. And I think the same thing happened like this week for me. It took a long time to get to this place, but then all of a sudden I could feel my brain shift, and I'm just thinking in a radically different way about some very personal topics, like some things that I didn't think I was ever going to be able to reframe. And it was kind of like a moment of realizing I had a couple extra inches in my jeans. I was like, oh, okay, this is why I'm doing all this. But it was still tiring. And so keeping your eyes on why you're doing it, keeping your eyes on the rewards that come from it. This whole week I've been so tired, but I've also been chill. Like I have not been emotionally erratic at all. I would have thought that I would have been a basket case all week, but I've been very chill. And that alone, I'm like, that's my 2 inches in my jeans. So anyway, yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about.
What do you mean?
You kicked on the microphone. I was like, Joel, just kick on the microphone. I'll just start talking. Because I'm very tired again, like I mentioned. Maybe I shouldn't go on and on about that. But let's take it to a practical level. Let's take it out of the realm of me just talking about whatever my week's been like, and let's take it into a practical level so that people can really start applying this.
Yeah, we use the word personal growth a lot, and I think in terms of like that's a great kind of overarching terminology, I guess. And one of the things I've noticed in Barnes & Noble recently is there's now a section in Barnes & Noble, a personal growth, and development section. And then there's also a self-transformation section, which I think is really interesting. Because I do think that identity level work, you're not just growing yourself as a person, you really are taking control of your own emotions, your own psychology, your own mindsets, and you're self-directing a transformational process over time. And that transformation process, the metamorphosizing, to borrow that word again, can burn a lot of energy. I think that's obviously any kind of growth, development, skill building uses energy, but man, transformation, when you're really trying to get to identity level shifts, deep core identity level changes, you are going to burn more energy than you realize, weirdly enough. And if you don't budget for that, if you don't think about some of the tangible ways, if you enter a growth project like that you might not have enough resource to get through the whole thing, or you might have to abandon ship halfway through, or it just might be very destabilizing in your life. So I want to talk about some practical ideas. If you want to enter into a transformational time period of your life, if you want to go through a self-transformational process of getting into the core identity and challenging yourself at a core identity level, what are some practical things you can do to manage the energy and actually have that be a process that works? So I just jotted a few notes down, and we could talk about these as we go through. I think the first thing, we were watching, by the way, the other day, this awesome documentary online, Tony Robbins documentary, I'm Not Your Guru, which I think is a fantastic documentary. And in that documentary, Tony Robbins talked a lot about the questions of our lives. He said, most you here in this room, this is from one of his workshops, are asking yourself a core fundamental question. And you need to identify what that question is, because when you can identify what questions you're asking yourself, well, those are the answers you're giving yourself. And that's the way your reality is going forward in life. That's the kind of emotions you have. That's the kind of life you have and all that. So I think when you go down a self-transformation path and you're trying to manage energy, one of the things you need to look for are the really good questions of what am I actually attempting to do here? Because we often think we're going to be working on something in column A, and as we start to unpack, as you and I, Antonia, as I was working on that wall, breaking down some of my barriers, some of my wounding, some of all the stuff that's been blocking me from some personal growth stuff on a really high level that I want to work on, identity level stuff. I thought it was maybe one direction, and now as I'm doing that work, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm getting more clarity of what it is I'm actually after here. What is it? Is it healing? Is it achievement? Is it transcendence? Is it in my personal, psyche? Is it around relationships? Is it around success? What is it that I'm trying to work on? And so getting really clear in the definition of what it is that you want to transform in your life. And it'll probably surprise you as you start to ask yourself more questions. You might want to spend some time journaling. Again, some of this personal growth work that I'm going through in the last couple of weeks has been years in the making, years of discovery, years of breaking down some of those woundings and some of that wall. And I've gotten more clear as time's gone on. And that clarity that I've brought to it has really helped me accelerate the growth process and manage the energy around it. It could be that's one of the reasons why I have so much energy right now. I mean, maybe I'm just excited about some of the work I've done. And also some of it has just it's been a long process. And I don't know, I don't know exactly why I have a lot of energy right now, but that's one thing, is defining the goals. And I hate to even use the word goal because it sounds so like metrics, like goal, and then cross it off a to-do list, because it's more of a discovery than that. It's more about like zones of your life that you kind of want to handle. Why do you want to handle them? What is it about this? What is the core motivation? What's the reason this is a challenge for you? Why is this an identity shift you want to make? Maybe the identity shift you want to make, just to pull this out of thin air, is you are realizing that the faith background you live in or have lived in up till now is not working for you anymore. Maybe you've had some kind of a religious practice or a faith background, and you don't want to abandon the whole thing, but you know that inside of you there's a shift that wants to be made. You want to shift yourself and transform yourself at an identity level from identifying with this core ideology or this core belief structure. Maybe it's a political structure, religious structure, whatever, and you want to just loosen that up and shift a little bit into something different. And you're not exactly sure what that new version of you is going to look like, but maybe there's some limiting beliefs that this religious or political structure or ideology has given you. Identify some of those and start working down that list. And the more you work down there to go, okay, why do I believe this? And why is this a challenge? What is this not serving in my life? Why do I want to have an identity level change here? Why do I want to challenge my reality in this way? And by asking those questions and just drilling down, the more fidelity you get in this, I believe that transformational process will be better suited to you, because you're going to have a clarity of, not outcome, but a clarity of what you're working on. Because I'm not sure if you can actually have an outcome at this point. You might have a vision, a very specific vision in your life of what kind of identity you want to have. But it's been my experience in working and coaching with people and in my own life that you don't always have a clear picture of what the other side's going to look like. And in fact, when you attach to one that's too specific, you can often be surprised, and that can stop your progress because you have this really specific outcome that you want, and then you don't get there. Maybe you discover all these parts about yourself, and you're like, oh, well, now what do I do? How do I reconcile what I thought I was going to become in this process and who I'm actually becoming? So I think the questions are more important here than the answers. I guess to summarize this first step is get really clear on what questions you're asking yourself. When you're working on identity level stuff, your questions are more important than your answers right now, because getting down and getting clear on what you're working on is powerful to take you in the direction you want.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I was just going to say, what's your second note? Because your first one's awesome.
Okay, cool. So I think the other piece is setting expectations and boundaries for yourself and the others that might be impacted by your work. Again, let's just take that example. You and I have both been through transformations with a previous paradigm and faith background and political affiliations and other things that we have basically taken control of, and we've shifted them into something different, right, over the course of the last several years. So setting expectations and boundaries. Let's say you're in a marriage right now, and both of you are part of this faith background, and you're looking to maybe change parts of your core identity around the thing that you and maybe even your spouse or lover got together around. Maybe it was like a really big part of the bonding experience of you getting into this relationship. Well, now you're going to start exploring parts of yourself. Maybe you've got some other ideas and some things you want to explore about yourself, but now it's going to start impacting the person you're with, maybe your kids, maybe your extended family, maybe your friendships. And so as you enter into this growth experience, you're going to have to figure out, how do I navigate this with clear boundaries and expectations for those around me? And this can be a challenge because not everybody's going to be at the same pace you're in, especially if you're in relationships with people, friendships or romantic relationships. This is a massive threat because as you change your core identity, people understand who they are in relation to other things. So now other people's identities are going to be challenged and threatened by you changing yours. So by looking at the expectations and the boundaries that you're going to have, a lot of communication up front to say, hey, I'm working on some of this stuff. Please don't panic. I'm not going to leave this, religious practice and go join this other crazy thing over here that you're nervous about. But I am going to explore some parts of myself. Allowing the person you're with or the people you're with in your life to understand that is really important, to set some of those boundaries and some of those frameworks and some of those expectations. So managing expectations is another part, because that's going to help you not have to burn so much energy in the process of growing. You're going to need all the energy you can to grow. And if you have to spend all that energy managing the people around you and all their responses to your growth, that can be a huge energy burn. So you're trying to manage your energy at this point, right?
Yeah, the only thing I would say about that is I would caution when you're setting expectations, which I think is imperative. The only thing I would caution against is being too specific about what you won't be doing. As in, I'm not gonna be leaving this thing over here and going to this thing over there. The only reason why I'd be cautious about that is because I've said that very same thing and then ended up doing the thing I said I wasn't gonna do because I didn't know who I was gonna be at the end of all of it. So when you're setting expectations, how you might articulate it is, I don't anticipate doing this. I don't see that happening necessarily. However, and this is part of expectation setting, I want to keep things open enough so that I might end up at a place that I didn't think that I was ever going to end up. In fact, you and I had this conversation this week. Your development work, and it probably kind of sounded a little, superior in this idea of you had this wall and you and I together have broken down this wall and now you can go explore this, part of who you are. And then I just had this film. There have been other parts of me that had pretty big walls that you've helped me break down. So this is kind of a give and take in our relationship. But what ended up happening is when you ended up going down this road of development and growth in this way, in the specific way we're talking about, which we're being very vague around because it's deeply personal. But when you started going down that road, just watching you and observing you and seeing the changes that you're already making have impacted me, and I'm starting to make kind of sort of concurrent changes. Even though we're not doing this work together, I'm starting to feel the need to do something very similar to what you're doing. And you asked me if I needed to make, if I was going to go down a certain road that would require both of us to sort of brace ourselves in certain actions. Are we going to make big life decisions right now? And I don't actually have any anticipation of doing that, But again, I've said that before and then done the very thing that I said I wasn't going to do. So I just kept it super open-ended. I just went, I have no idea if I'm going to go down that road. No clue whatsoever. But I want to leave it open to just in case I end up there. So I think when you're setting expectations with the people in your life, one of the things you might want to do is when you're saying, I don't have any anticipation of doing it, just make sure that you've given yourself enough space to explore whatever needs to be explored. Because if you don't do that, if you've made a promise in the beginning that you won't go down a certain path, and then that's the path that's in front of you, and then you end up stopping because you want to honor your promises, then you're like the liquefying caterpillar that has to stop in the middle of liquefaction. So give yourself enough room to do whatever it is you need to do in order to complete the process, but at the same time, let people know that you don't have anticipation of like destroying your entire life around you.
Yeah, and also part of the expectation is, hey, I don't think that I'm going to have to leave. Like, I'll again use the religious example just to give you something concrete to latch onto as you're listening, so you kind of get a sense of what I'm saying. I don't anticipate necessarily leaving our faith background. Maybe I'll be a little bit more open, but I'll tell you this. If the time comes when I'm thinking about that as a decision, I'm going to come and check in with you and we'll have a conversation about it. So you're not going to just you're not going to have me come home from work one day, honey, and all of a sudden I'm going to say, I don't believe this anymore, and we're now moving over here, and I'm going to join this now new way of thinking and religion, and our whole family has to join. It's like, I'm not going to surprise you. Manage expectations is helping manage surprises as well.
Exactly.
So it's not so much promising not to do something or not do something. It's also saying, hey, when this comes up, if there's a movement that I need to make, I want to fully come to you. And again, it depends on the relationship. Maybe friendships or extended family, you don't have to be this direct or this checking in all the time. But in a romantic relationship, for example, let's say you and your spouse, again, got married in a certain faith background, and now you're looking to transition something. You have to have touch points. You have to have like these moments where you check in and, again, continually manage expectations. Managing expectations isn't something you just set up one time and then it's over. You have to continually check in and readjust those and the negotiations that happen among that for the growth that needs to happen. And again, you may not be with somebody that's going to be okay with any of this. You might be with somebody that's like, no, absolutely not. I don't want you to grow in any of these ways. I don't want you to transform in any of these ways. It's too threatening to me. And it's not the person I got together with, or it's not the person I'm in a friendship with, or you're not my son, you're not my father, whatever the thing is, the vocalization is, right? Or the communication is from the person that you want to change around and you're trying to manage expectations with. I think it's not always going to happen where they're ready to just jump in and, yeah, this is great, I'll provide space for this. So we're talking about in a situation where that's the case. And if they're not super gung-ho about it, you're going to have to figure out that in your life too. And I don't exactly give you advice on that one, but we'll think about it some more, and maybe there's ways we can help give you some ways to think about people that are resistant to change in your life. The other expectations you're going to have to manage are your own. I mean, it's not just the external expectations. When you go down a self-transformation path, we have a lot of beliefs about our reality. We have a lot of beliefs about our self-identity. We have a lot of beliefs about who we are. And it can be jarring to the system when you start to make discoveries about yourself or changes about yourself, and you're like, oh my, I never assumed this about myself. Like, I didn't know I had this in me, or I didn't know I had this internal power, or I didn't know I had this weakness or this challenge or whatever it is. You have to manage the expectations of saying, I might come up against some stuff that's really surprising. It's hard for me to take. Like, it's going to be like, like getting punched in the gut. And I'm going to have to manage through that and manage my energy through that. So I think that's a key piece. Is it's not just the people around you. You yourself have to be managed in some way. You have to basically set yourself up for success by saying, I'm going to be gentle with myself as I discover parts about who I am in this journey. So that's number 2 is set expectations and boundaries.
I'm super curious about number 3. I'm loving that you jotted these notes down. And can I just tell you how grateful I am that you're picking up so much slack because I'm like so tired.
It's all good.
And my brain is kind of fuzzy, and I'm like, I'm not even sure if I've said anything on this podcast yet. I'm not.
Oh, you've said a lot.
I mean, I used words, but I'm not sure if any of them had meaning. So I'm like super grateful that I'm like, Joel, this is fascinating. Tell me about your model. So what's number 3?
It's not necessarily a model. I just jotted some notes down as we were talking. I was like, no, it's kind of came to me in real time. I didn't think about it ahead of time. So there might be more to add to this, and it's not like completely fleshed out. It's just like a quick little bullet list.
Effectively, what you're saying is that me droning on about nonsense gave you the time and space to be able to write something that was amazing. So
you were my muse.
So I'm feeling like I did a public service then.
You were my muse, I do have to say. Timelines is number 3. So this idea of you like personal growth happens, it can happen rapidly. Like you could basically decide to transform something in your identity right now, right? But that's really not how it works. I mean, we have to take time to question ourselves and to get in there and go, can I let this belief about myself go? I don't know. Let me test it for a couple days. You let it go and, oh no, I want to pull it back in. You know, like this dance with your belief systems and identity changes. And it can be a process. I mean, it can happen in a moment, but that moment is hard won. You spend a lot of time getting up to that moment, right? So don't discount this idea of timelines, meaning that you're going to need time set aside for personal growth work or personal transformation work. And I would recommend, one of the things I'm starting to do now is I'm starting quarterly, so once every 13 weeks, once every 3 months, schedule about 4 days where I just go away by myself to kind of clear my head and just do some personal growth stuff, right? That's kind of something I'm getting into a rhythm. I'm only doing it twice now, but I'm realizing like maybe that's kind of a good rhythm of just getting away just to do some identity level transformation work. And I think that scheduling time can be one thing, or a daily practice, carving out some time. I know you've been carving out time, Antonia. You were talking about those journals earlier, making up this journal. In the mornings, you're getting up and you're carving at least an hour out in the mornings to spend some time just doing this. This is an early morning practice to just get in touch with how you're feeling, what's going on in your psychology, you know, your identity stuff. You're putting this together, and it's a practice you're starting to do every day. So there's more of like a daily practice in transformation, and then probably a monthly or quarterly practice where you schedule some time just with yourself to go do transformational work. And this is important because you're going to need to go ahead and get the time to focus and have the time resource in order to make these shifts and changes. And if you don't have that, it's always going to be a thing, okay, well, I'll do this next week. I'll do this next week. I'll do this next week. Life gets in the way. If you don't schedule the time for it, you're going to get caught behind the 8 ball. You're going to get caught back saying, oh man, 5 years just went by, and I still wish I could transform this part of myself. I still am in this religious, again, I keep using the religious thing. I'm not saying you have to transform your religion or your paradigm. It's just a great example of somebody that's going through a transformational change that I've been through in my past. So that's why I keep using it as an example. But you'd say 5 years from now, man, I'm still going to the exact same religious practice, meetings that I went to before. I'm thinking the exact same ways. I've got the same results in my life. I've got pretty much the same core identity, and I know there's something more, but I just got so busy over the last 5 years. Well, if you don't want that to be your story, you're going to have to be proactive and schedule the time for growth. You're going to have to think in terms of, what can I do to get this jump started? That might even be signing up for a workshop. It might be having a friend hold you accountable. It might be, pushing yourself into situations where you don't really have an option not to start to transform. So oftentimes, if you get a digital program, like a personal growth program, it can be challenging to go through it, for example, to transform, right? Or to go ahead and do the study work. Maybe get a friend to hold you accountable to that, or sign up for a live program where you have to show up somewhere and you've got to be disciplined. You got to show up every morning. You pay a lot of money for it maybe, and you got to show up and do the work, put some time in to really work through your identity. So figure out ways to put schedule and timeline down to generate enough resource of time to be able to do the work that you need to do.
You and I probably, as much as anybody, understand how tough that is, because we have a pretty busy life. We run a business, we have kids, we have some challenges with your boys. So they're great kids, but they're going through a pretty rough time, and they're entering puberty, which is always a good time, right? That's always a party. It's kids entering puberty. And we have employees, and we've got communities that we're running, and we're at that age where we have little kids, and then we've got my parents are aging. My dad's going through probably kind of an end of life scenario right now. And we're in the squeeze. And when you're in the squeeze, it's so easy to feel like you just don't have any space at all. And so carving that time out, like we actually almost always have more than we realize. It's usually not a matter of time. It's usually a matter of energy, like we've been talking about.
And priority.
And priority. But sometimes priorities get wackadoodle if you just don't have the energy for it. Like you come home from a long day of work, and maybe it was a stressful day, and you had all these delusions of grandeur that you were going to sit the kids in front of some sort of, activity, and then you were going to journal, or you were going to like go through your personal development program that you just bought or whatever, and you get home from work and like literally you can't even, right? You're just tired and exhausted and you just want to watch something and veg out and go to bed. And so it's not that you didn't have the time after work to do it. It's that you didn't have the energy after work to do it. So most of the time when we say things like, I don't have the time to, what we're really saying is I don't have the energy to do something. Because we usually have more time than we realize. It's just we have to have R&R. We have to. So one of the things that I think a person can do when they're trying to figure out this piece of managing the time piece is that you make sure to first schedule your R&R. Where are you able to do high quality rest and relaxation as opposed to veg out, just get the bare minimum, be opportunistic about your rest and relaxation? If you're really struggling to do any personal development work in your life because you just don't have the energy for it, then I think one of the best things you can do is reevaluate the quality of your rest. And if your rest is not enough to get you through your days, then you need to increase the quality of your rest. And rest, it sounds like rest and relaxation sounds like, most of us do it by vegging out, I think. That's the entire reason why Netflix exists, is so that we can just like hit play and the thing itself pushes us to the next episode. So it's extremely easy to binge, right? And you like end up falling asleep having watched Netflix all night. And you're like, oh, what episode am I actually on? Because I think I fell asleep like 2 episodes ago. And that feels restorative because at least it was a veg out, but it wasn't high quality rest and relaxation. So one of the gifts we can give to ourselves when we're doing growth and development work is make sure that our rest and relaxation is as high quality as possible. And that usually means not just allowing like a backlit screen to entertain you and be able to shut your mind off for a while. It usually means like checking in and making sure you're actually getting enough sleep every night, and making sure like your bed situation, like is your mattress good? Is it giving you high quality sleep? Are you ensuring that you are not drinking caffeine too late in the day? So your rest is, do you have a medical condition that probably should be acknowledged? Like you need one of those breathing masks at night to be able to increase the quality of your sleep. Like really focus in on making your sleep a priority. And then after that, making sure that the alone time you get, I don't care if you're an introvert or an extrovert, you've got to make sure that you have high quality alone time every day. Every single human being on the planet needs high quality alone time. That could be reading, that could be meditating, that could be just chilling out, like on Reddit, who knows? But you need to have alone time that is just for you, and it's going to be uninterrupted. And I think every single human being needs a minimum of 30 minutes to an hour of that. And then that's not even rest and relaxation. That's just your alone time. And if you've got to get up way earlier than everybody else in your house to get it, then that's what you need to do. But you have to have that quality alone time. And then on top of that, so that's just the rest piece, I think. And then the relaxation piece is making sure that your relaxation is high quality as well. And that means not just vegging, but that means like doing things like laying out in the sun, right? And getting some vitamin D, and maybe taking walks in nature that's restorative, like doing things that truly restore your soul as opposed to just not being, in activity. And then if you give yourself that, if you can carve that out, and that's like one of the nicest things a person can do for themselves. It's one of the most like immediate ROI things you can do. And if you see it as part of your personal development journey in and of itself, then you start out by doing something that's a major gift to yourself. And then this personal development thing doesn't look so bad, because if that was piece of your personal development, then maybe you can handle the rest of it too. But I would say that handling your rest and relaxation first is one of the most important things you can do in order to have high quality development work later.
I think I feel like a hypocrite as we talk about getting good sleep, because I know you and I don't yet. And I think that's one of the challenges. Maybe it's down to our personality types or whatever, but the physical stuff is probably one of the biggest challenges for me is continue. And I just went through a really intense personal growth week last week. And I remember I made a very deliberate intention to make sure I wasn't putting any toxins in my body during that experience, because I was really working long hours. I was really focused on some identity level shifts. I was trying to eat really healthy. I would like go to Whole Foods and eat a kale salad like multiple times a day and have like different snacks that could feed into my body and like kombucha and weird hippie shit, right? Like all this stuff that you'd see like in a movie, some weird hippie guy eating or drinking. And I was really trying to be deliberate. The sleep part was a challenge because it was such an intensity. Part of the learning was not sleeping, weirdly enough, but I'll go into that someday in the future. Long story short, you have to take care of your physicality. And I'm really learning this as we talk about this. I do feel a little hypocritical because we don't get enough sleep at night, you and I. We tend to work long hours. We're running our own business. We got all these moving parts, and so it's like, well, let's just cut into some sleep. Let's take from our sleep time, and that's how we'll recoup some time to work on things like either personal growth or get family stuff done, or even our business stuff.
Well, you tend to journal at night, and it's hard. It's hard to carve that time out during the day. So you end up journaling at night, and I end up journaling in the morning, and both of us end up robbing from our sleep in order to pack in some journaling time.
Yeah.
And I would agree with that. I'm kind of preaching to myself right now when I talk about high quality sleep. But
absolutely.
But I do know that when I attend to that piece, I'm in a much better space to feel like I can, pour that energy into development.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that's a critical piece, and I am learning the value. And you really taught me this, Antonia, that recovery or that time, like that rest time where you actually get nourished R&R. I really think that you've helped me in that way in my life more than anybody else, in that I grew up in a context in my family where it was just run. I can just keep borrowing from my own energy levels because I have a lot of energy. But eventually that catches up to you and it comes out in other ways. Even if you think you have enough energy, you still need some of that recovery time or that energy building time. And so you've been very instrumental in me, every once in a while just taking a day off that I just need time to pretty much do nothing, just to kind of have a sense of energy restoration. And it's been really helpful for me to start building that discipline. So yeah, so this is something that as you're thinking in timelines, constructing the time you need for this, and that's going to be uniquely individualized to you. Listening, you're going to have your own life and your own schedule and your own energy levels and your own age and your own experience and your own health, all those things to manage. So we can't really give you very specific advice around that because it's tailored to you, but just understand that you're going to need to make some space for that personal transformation. I think the other piece of this then is a touch point, some way to get a feedback loop or a touch point for the growth that you're doing. If you're in the middle of a transformational process, you don't want to be completely untethered and just be free form. One thing is you can start a journal around it, or you can capture that in some format. Maybe it's an audio recording on your phone. Maybe it's typing stuff out on the internet, on like an online journal. Maybe it's writing in a physical journal. I love the idea of writing in a physical journal because I'm kinesthetic, and it's a very visceral experience for me to write in a physical journal some of the stuff I'm understanding. But also, remember, you need feedback to the people around you. We talked again about managing expectations. That's an ongoing process. So this feedback loop is talking through with maybe somebody you trust about some of the transformation you're going through. Hey, I've got this, again, borrowing from this idea of maybe leaving a paradigm, religious, political, ideology, whatever, and you're talking with somebody you trust to say, here's some stuff that's coming up for me. Here's the feedback that's happening in my transformational process. Here are all the fears I'm facing. Like, I'm really scared of this. This thing came up and I don't know. Can I let this part of me go? Can I go through this? Am I going to be okay on the other side? What do you think? And you get somebody you trust to bounce some ideas off of and create that feedback loop. Because if you have, at least for me, when I have somebody to talk with about some of the growth I'm going through and some of the transformation I'm going through, there's blind spots I'm not seeing. There's questions that they can help ask that I'm not asking myself, that I'm like, oh yeah, and it triggers a whole bunch of other questions for me to ask myself. So journaling is good, capturing things is good, but also feedback with another person or people in your life. And again, this is a great opportunity then too, to manage those expectations, continually managing expectations as you're talking through what's going on for you. Hey, lover, spouse, partner, I'm not really thinking about leaving this paradigm, but I am re-questioning how I show up to this paradigm. This political worldview is so extreme on this one way, and I agree with the politics and some of the policies, but I really feel maybe that I could expand my identity to include these other things as well. I was, oh no, really? Like that's a threat to me. Well, let's talk through it. Whatever you would go through that and managing those expectations as you start to shift your identity. And again, this is with the goal in mind to manage your energies throughout the process. Feedback's going to help you actually take what you're learning and apply it to your life and to anchor it into that new identity you're constructing, and also manage the energies around you that can can definitely hijack you from the growth you want to do and the transformation you want to do. And then finally, I think this kind of goes to what you were just saying about the rest time, is there needs to be some kind of an integration process. So when we do big shifts, like if you're going to the gym a lot and you're doing exercise, you don't literally go and do like leg day every day. You have to do leg day maybe on Mondays, work your legs out in a really intense way. And then you need integration time. You need time for your muscles to rebuild and get stronger. And so you don't do leg day the next day or maybe a few days after, depending on how intense you did it, maybe a week after. And it's a time for your body to recover. And we can kind of get that with exercise, right? But in personal growth or identity level shift, you can't just be pounding the pavement every single second. You have to have a intense maybe growth time or transformation time, and then a rest period for your identity to almost rebuild its muscle fiber, right? Because you're ripping parts of your identity, just like you'd rip your muscles as you're growing or stretching in the gym. You're ripping parts of your identity, and it has to be refilled in with new identity level stuff. And so you need the space to be able to do that. You've got to give yourself some relaxation, some space, some integration time after you've done the feedback loop and you've checked in on some of the stuff you're learning. You again might need to think in terms of that timeline and schedule some time for recovery, schedule some time for integration for, okay, what does this now mean? What you might have shifted your identity, but you don't have an action step from it yet. You don't know what you're going to do with this new way of seeing the world. Maybe you've shifted. Maybe you've transformed your old paradigm or your old belief system, and you haven't gotten completely rid of it, but you've integrated what was good about it. You've transcended the parts that were challenging for you, and now you've got this whole new way of seeing the world on the other side. Well, you're going to have to give yourself some time to figure out how you move through the world now. The action steps may not be as obvious to you right out of the gate because your identity's sore and tired and has been ripped up a little bit from the work you've been doing. And so you got to fill that muscle fiber in. And then after that, you're going to take some time to start making new applications from the new identity you've shifted to. So I think that can also be the point of managing energy is you need the time, the down cycle time in order to rebuild some of those parts before you maybe start the next phase of growth. So it's going to be seasonal type cyclical work, right? Through identity level, managing energy. You can't do it all at once. You're going to have different things built in and thinking in terms of those timelines. So these are some ideas I jotted down in managing energy. I'm sure it's not a complete list. There's probably other ways to manage your energy when you're doing transformational work. Again, skill building work can take energy, and personal growth skills can rob from you. But man, when you're doing transformational identity level reality work, you're challenging your current identity, you're challenging your current reality deliberately. Just getting to that place to be able to do that is a lot of work. And then when you start that process, you're going to have to manage the energy. And I think this is a good list to get you started. But I think we'd love to hear what your tips and tricks are. Have you gone through some identity level work where you've transformed yourself? What did we miss on this list? What else can we add to this list for people that are listening? Your voice needs to be represented, and we want to hear your story. Maybe you've gone through transformation and you discovered a really interesting hack for holding space for yourself or for creating the container for that personal growth to happen. I'd love to hear, Antonia and I would love to hear, and probably the community at large also, what your experience was in that. What was some of the stuff you learned, and how can we apply that here as a community? How can I learn from you at this point? You don't have a microphone. You can't talk to me right now live because this is recorded, pre-recorded, but you can come over to personalityhacker.com and you can leave a comment, ask a question, share your story, share your experience directly below this podcast and let us know how you manage energy through the transformation process. Or is there a time when you burned out? You didn't set up some of these conditions, you burned out and you learned from it. What did you learn? I want to hear your story. Or man, you just got through a huge transformation process and it was hard work, but you learned some ways on how you could manage that better next time. And you're like, hey, if I had to do this again, here's the 3 things I'd add to your list, Joel. These are the things that you really need to add to that because this is going to help you get through. This is how I did it in managing my energy. And it's going to be different. All of our personality types are going to manage this differently. Some of us have more energy than others. If you're an INFJ, you're going to maybe approach it differently than an ENTP. But we all have ways of moving through the world that I think we can co-create here and get a sense of how can we help support each other in this growth process.
Yeah, I can predict 2 comments. The first one's going to be like, somebody's going to say, hey, you didn't say what to tell a partner that's not okay with you growing at all. And that's a subject that actually people have asked us about in the past. I think we should do a podcast on it. How do you communicate to your spouse who might be highly resistant to you doing growth work? I think that's something we could address all by itself, because you dropped that and then we didn't talk about it.
Highly resistant, or that's like on the nicest level of it. It could be hostile.
The hostile, yeah.
On the higher end of it, like violently hostile toward it.
Yeah, so I think we should have a conversation around that in the future. So let's tag that. The second comment that we're going to get is nobody does leg day on Monday. Nobody. Nobody does leg day on Monday.
I'm trying to think of my brother. He's a weightlifter. I thought he did his on. That's why I picked Monday. I thought he always does it on Monday, the first day of the week, to get it out of the way.
Oh, he might, but he's odd. I think nobody does it on Monday. But we'll get a comment now. We'll know. Someone will be like,
"What's like everybody doing on Monday?" And you're like,
well, then
I hope everybody comes and says, I always do leg day on Monday.
I know. And then
I would love that.
My making that comment with confidence will be completely.
It's fine to me. I don't really care when people do leg day. So Monday was just a day I pulled out of my.
It was arbitrary.
Yeah.
The arbitrary Monday leg day. So yeah, those. I think we should do a podcast though on that topic, on how to talk to spouses or people who are resistant.
I think that would be that'd be an interesting topic to talk about.
Yeah. All right. Well,
episode.
If you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. And if you want to support Personality Hacker and what we do, one of the best ways to do that is to go check out our premium content. Figure out if there is a program in there that is right for you. It's a win-win because you get to invest in yourself and your personal development through our programs, and you also get to support Personality Hacker and what we do and keep our podcast going. So we recommend going and checking that out. And if you'd like to leave us a rating and review on iTunes, that is also a way you can support us, and that helps us out a lot.
Yeah. My name is Joel Markwitt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we will talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast.